the session. So welcome everyone. We are in this Barcelona Technology School talks, so BTS talks about demystifying data in business. And we are here today with Filipa Peleja. Welcome, Filipa.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Okay, so I am Jara Pascual, and as well lecturer as Filipa in the BTS at university. So we are talking about data, which is, everyone is talking about data, but we don't know really what is going on when we have a data project. So first question, as you are the lead of data scientist, so what are you doing at work, Filipa?
So as a lead data scientist, I would say we continue our journey as a data scientist role. So when you think about the solutions and thinking about the data, what is the data that I need to build my solution? So that's always part of the conversation. Is the data there? Is it structured? Do I actually need some support, or even is something that I need to first understand on my own? So that's, I think, as a data journey starts. As a lead, I would say that sometimes what actually happens is I try to help the team to allow them to have visibility. So what is out there, build a better communication with our data engineering team as well. And then another layer on top is, can we actually have some repositories that allows us to be more effective as we work more than once on top of the same data sources?
Yeah, but maybe I know from reality, some systems who store the data, they are very old and they didn't follow before all this structure, we can say. So how you are doing with these platforms or systems, they are already there. They are using it for specific topics, but it's very difficult to integrate data. So you create tables, or how you compare data to integrate different systems in one, or how do you deal with these cases? Like you create your own APIs and then you call the old company who created this system and say, can you do this now?
It's like when we draw all the possible dark scenarios, right? When you think about all, and I would use the term legacy systems, right? So I would say, broadly speaking, that it really depends. It depends across organizations. It depends also on the project that you're working in. In general, even on like a data science role, how much involved I am. So you mentioned APIs, right? So if you were a smaller team, let's imagine that you're working more like on you're starting to incorporate there. So I agree. most likely you have more effort there. If you have more support, so already you have data engineering teams, they will be more closely related to that moment rather than a data science role. And when I say data science, can also be the data analyst, for example, right? So there's like, say, these two possible scenarios if I want to split it into kind of a high level. Then you were talking a bit about like, okay, it's coming from different systems. They might even have different schemas. So the data governance is a hot topic, right? So the way I see it, again, it does touch bases on where we are at on the organization level. But the way I see it is that more and more there's attention to it. So we are making that life journey easier. Now, it's still a pain. So basically, from our perspective, people who really depend on the data, what we do try to do is, okay, it wasn't there yet. How can we communicate this? How can we share? And how we can even identify our colleagues within the organization can actually make it more visible so we don't have to go through it again. So yeah, so I think that's more or less how we are at, and it really depends a lot on us, right? So I had to do that, all that journey. Can I also kind of enable that for my colleagues as well?
Yeah, and the other question, like everyone, it seems like they are looking for a data scientist, is the question, when really do you know and do you need a data scientist in your project? How do you know you need one?
Well, it depends. So I would say it starts with the business need, right? So let's take one example. I'm being approached by the marketing team. They have a new product that they want to launch. And this can be valid. So I've worked in different organizations. It can be valid for telecommunication. It can be valid for retail. It can be valid for anything, right? So we have a new product. So they want to understand to whom we should address that, right? So maybe I should not, poke around all my clients because not everybody's going to be necessarily interested in this specific product. So I want to kind of, save their time. So as I understand this need, and I gave you one example, the way that I see it is, okay, clearly I'll have a predictive model. So the model will help me predict who should be a good candidate for me to promote that product, but also I have the whole EDA, so the data preparation to get there. So that's one moment that, okay, as I understand the problem, before I even go about it, I know that I have these two moments. Other times, and also I know that that's probably the reason why you asked me. So other times we actually have more, not necessarily an ask that is already thinking about the machine learning component out of it. So the predictive moment. Other times is we need to understand our data, right? So, and that could be as simple as in thinking about, let's say, the e-com world, who are our clients, right? So you can think about doing some data analysis, like, first of all, again, where is the data that allows me to understand what's going on? And then try to see if there's any type of similarities that, allows you to say you have different, for example, the word segments that sometimes we hear about. So they're not necessarily segments. You could do it in a smarter way, but that could be part of the journey. And then when I'm saying smarter way, you could also build some models that try to actually put them together without doing those segment rules, because perhaps that's not at all times the ideal way of approaching your customer base.
Yeah, and then I want to ask you the other way around. Yeah. So when we have a CEO in a company and they say, well, I don't need data, all is fine, but at the same time, they have the IT department, the consumer insight department, the other departments, they are gathering as well data because they need it for their work they are doing, but it's not all, we can say, aggregated, and then they are losing a lot of information, really, the company, but the CEO or the owner of the organization, they don't see this value. So how, from your perspective, could be a part of argument and help the CEO, in this case of the organization, to understand the importance of data and to aggregate data from maybe external sources and internal sources, to combine, I don't know, in a in this, not only in the platform, but, to everyone is doing different efforts and it's not combined. So how could you advise this type of, behavior?
I would start by saying that not all times this is something that is actually landing on us, but we do sense that, right? So I would say you touched the point, like the effort, right? So one of the points is perhaps we could try to quantify the effort that is being done across these different teams, right? So we have different departments that are really focused on the data in general is a dependency. So are we actually replicating efforts? Did findings from one of those teams did not reach the other team, and they took much longer to actually have the same findings, but they didn't leverage from each other? So there's a couple of things here. So first of all, we want to remove redundancy. Can we quantify the effort that team had when if we would have known? And the shareability, right? So it's not only redundancy, it's sharing, right? So perhaps I don't even have the bandwidth to go about it, but if I would have been allowed to access what the other teams did, I would have leveraged that component as I, built my insights, drove certain conclusions and so forth. So I think it needs to start by identifying the touch points and trying to quantify the effort. The effort can be in time, it can be even on revenue, right? So you missed some opportunity just because you are not be able to actually have a common touch point on the data points that are required for those solutions.
Yeah, and you mentioned now sharing data. And I have here one point, like, I don't know how you deal with this. It's like, I prefer to have a student copy pasting data in different databases, like to have developed an API. So what can you say to these leaders who prefer to have manual work through systems instead to properly unify and connect systems to have, a very good data?
I wouldn't say that. I don't think anybody wants that, honestly. the ad hoc solutions. So there's a trade-off, right? So regardless if it's copy paste or, let's say like it's not the ideal way of bringing to life your solution. There's a trade-off. You need to think about the go-to-market. So you have a commitment. Perhaps you do not have the bandwidth to do it perfectly. So that's one trade-off. And there's the other side of the coin, which is, okay, I'm going to do it every step of the way to make it. And it could be like a code base that is beautiful. It can be even an architecture that can be reused and so forth. So this type of abstraction, it does require effort and time. So there's this kind of go-to-market trade-off versus doing it perfectly. So it really depends, honestly. So I'm not giving you like an exact answer because it really depends on the need of both. Ideally, I think if we can put them together at the same time, make sure that you commit to your delivery. So you want to make sure that if there's any dependency that is a deliverable coming from your end, you are able to commit to that. But at the same time, the things that you did not do in the best implementation possible, you are already paving the way to have that. So that was just one way to address it quicker, but you're already kind of promoting the changes that are required and you can just address them across time. So that's usually how I know when I'm involved, I try to tackle it, but it really depends from case to case. And if it's just one go, perhaps it's not even worth the effort, right? So if it's just one go, it's one go. It was a very specific need. So let's not overcomplicate the solution that cannot even be, it's not tangible how you can actually leverage all that effort for other initiatives.
Yeah, super, super good. I think that's super helpful. So now we are going to more technical questions about what are the technologies that you can use, as a business for data, or how to be used to work with data.
All right. I think, I can share a bit about where I've been mostly in contact with, but it does change according to where we are at. So if I think about developing a solution, so for example, I've been most of my career more exposed to Python. So naturally, I would try to have some bias towards that programming language, Python and PySpark, when I need to use Spark as well. But I know that there are the programming languages such as R, and it really depends where you're coming from, right? So there are organizations that have more developers towards one programming language versus the other. I know I'm touching point these two because I know they are the most popular ones. But let's think about another, and I'm going to call like data science persona. So let's say that I don't really know how to code, but I really know a lot about what is the process for me to get the data ready. So there are different tools that also allow you to do that through more visual components. So you can just build a pipeline through the operations, you know the operations, you have them connected, but you don't really need to actually develop code per se. It really depends. So this just to say that I think it's a world in terms of you want to work with data, you know what you want to do, you've studied what are the things, and I'm just going to name a few, like data quality checks. Do I have a lot of missing data? Do I have noisy data? Do I have actually some distribution that doesn't seem sound to me? So I kind of know a few kind of steps out of the way, but I'm not really good in programming. I don't know Python, I don't know R. So there are also technologies that allow you to do that. So in general, what I would say is when you see a position that you would like to apply for, see the technology stack they're working on and see the ones that are the best fit for you, because you basically choose the direction that you want to grow within your career. So this is about the touching point on top of the data. There's also SQL, right? So if you think about, if you are in a cloud platform such as Google, for example, you can have something like BigQuery. If you are maybe on Amazon, you have something like Redshift. So you have different solutions. In general, if you know how to work top of SQL, you also know how to explore your data, which is pretty handy to kind of know what it is in a very fast manner.
Yeah, and I think even if you don't, I was thinking about managers or leaders inside organizations, when they don't know about data, but still maybe they have idea what to do with the data. So I think, what do you think about, to draw something, all the flows of data and systems, to say, okay, I want to do this. So what do you need, as a data scientist and as well as a lead, coming from the other part of the organization, which kind of information, even if they are not super techy, they can do this kind of visual thinking and send to you, and then it's a very good baseline to discuss? Or how do you approach this?
So let me see if I can. So you're talking about people that are not necessarily tech, putting their, let's say, hands dirty, but they do have a sense about what is the possible data points that can be connected, and also sometimes they are the ones that enable some data points through some partners. Okay. So if you think about it in terms of what I was just talking about earlier, like when do I see if a given project, is it a predictive model or not? So that's the moment of brainstorming, exploration, like which are the problems that we want to address. And in that point, you don't really need to have the people there that go and dig up the data itself. You need to kind of understand your problem and where is the data that we need to approach it. And we might not even have that data, and it's a very good exercise. So on that point, it's like some of the diagrams that you just shared, right? So in a perfect world, I don't have any limitations. Which are the data that could help me? So you start with that, and that's something that it's a journey that of course, many times we are involved, but it does originate first by the experts in the field, right? So the ones that know very well the business problem, and they come to us, and then we kind of take it from there. And usually it's like a lot of things, and then you kind of, okay, better understand, like, okay, this one we can, it's tangible, this one we can't. And just, I haven't mentioned yet, and maybe this is something we would mention afterwards, but you need to take into account also the GDPR issues, right? So any solution that is related to data, we need to think about privacy. So that's a thing that it starts by, the design of the problem. If we have any privacy topics, we need to address them and take them away before even we go about it. And usually it's also a journey that is not only with the business need, but also together with our privacy colleagues that helps us understand better where to go.
Yeah, and I think here is the question I wanted to ask you about unstructured data. But here about the GDPR, it's super funny. When we have data, is GDPR sensitive? and we have data is not GDPR sensitive, how to match both of them, how to connect systems. So then the non-GDPR has to become GDPR sensitive, even if the data is stored in different systems, but you have to transfer data from one to another, you have to rework the data and to make sure it's GDPR proof as well, no?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how is it. Usually I'm not involved in those steps. But of course, you need to make sure that. So the data should not ever, if it has any privacy issue, should not even be visible to you if it does not make any sense. So that's usually where I'm landing, right? So if there's anything that is sensitive, it's not me, my role, I don't see it. If you need it for a specific requirement, because there are certain things that you might need it and it's allowed, then it's a special case, it's getting to you in a very protected environment. So all of those things are already kind of laid out for you. But then again, it really depends where you're at. So if that's not happening, I would advise let's say the data analyst, the data scientist, if that's not being guaranteed, you should just raise a flag straight away and say, hey, I'm seeing something that I shouldn't see. And you want to do that because let's imagine that there's any data breach in your machine or something like that. Then, you have a certain responsibility, right? So you want to avoid that. So in general, you're not part of the process, you know that it happens, and it should not be visible for you by default, at least.
Super good. So going back to the question, what is unstructured data?
Oh, unstructured. I can tell you the classic one, right? So let's imagine that you have customer feedback, like you ask them to share their feedback written, it's text. So that's completely unstructured, right? It's not a tabular data, like let's say from your clients, like how long they are with us, how many purchases of products they've done. So that's actually, I'm talking about columns, right? So it has a very fixed structure. So I have a schema to it. I have a table with a very fixed schema with some even data types within each column, like this is text, this is numerical and so forth. So if I think about text, I don't have that structure. So it just means that our journey starts, it has a kind of a slower curve because we need to identify what is the structure. A classic example for text is my structure could be words. I can use words, or I can just extract entities that can be locations, these sort of things, because actually the structure that I need out of that is those specific words for specific terms like locations. If I think about sentiment, again, I'm going to take those specific tokens that are really important for me to represent the text by them, and everything else I can just ignore. So that is an example. Another example of unstructured documentation, unstructured data, let's put it this way. It's when, for example, you have data that comes from, let's say, imagine you need to work with invoices, right? You need to help out in there. So the invoices are in Word documents and PDF documents. So that's also known as semi-structured because there's a certain structure to that type of file format, but it's still not properly handed over to you as a table, right? So you have this process of, taking from there the rich things that are important for you, and then you continue your journey. So that's kind of what it means. I don't have a table all nice for me to kind of explore and take it from there. I need to build that schema.
Yeah, totally. And well, you have as well the free keys of super structure. And I think that's as well a little bit more complicated when really sometimes you need to have a little bit more of flexibility. So I think coming to the middle and looking for solutions to a middle part of structured and structured data could be super beneficial for, I think, the community. And this is the next question for you. How do you communicate data insights to business? Like dashboards, statistics, when you have this structure and structured data and mix of them. So how do you communicate data like after business, they can make decisions and they can perform?
So it depends on the level that you are sharing, right? So I'm going to talk from top to more granular. So dashboards, visual components, they're very strong. So that's in terms of taking insights out of it, what are, from everything that we weren't able to capture because of the volume of the granularity, I was able to, together with all the data analysis, even predictive models, kind of give you that takeaway. So dashboards is a very strong component, and you can actually help design them, you can help put them together and automate them to be refreshed. So that's one. Now, before getting there, sometimes we actually need to have some data checkpoints. And again, they are the ones who know really to the core of it, the problem, because they are the business experts on the topic. We are helping them, right? So when we actually see certain distributions analysis, let's say a distribution of our products, how they are being adopted. A product could be, for example, if I think about now I'm going to give a telecommunication example. We offer different tariffs, right? So how are tariffs being distributed? How are they being distributed on a given region, for example, right? So you want to better address the regions, so you want to know which products are more popular. So during that journey, it is advisable, and we do it quite often. We share, we say, we're observing this. And actually, sometimes with that, we actually find data quality problems that were not obvious per se, but the business said, hey, that's not what happened in that specific year. So you can actually go in that moment that you're very specific on the numerics, and you show some numbers and percentage and, compare different groups. You sometimes even talk about where the data is coming from, because the business, even though they're not necessarily at all times hands-on, they are fully aware of a lot of data sources that they can share and make us aware of it. So I think it's kind of this journey from, and then in the end, yes, I would say if you manage to put it through visuals, that's the best way possible.
Yeah, and I think now after you are talking about this, it came to my mind a question about really when you are looking at data is when you find issues of the organization sometimes. So I think it's very good exercise to do it, like looking at data sources, what data is available and which kind of data we need is when we say, wow, how a chaos, no? I mean, like really there is as well this job of almost a doctor, and you can check how much your company can perform much better when you have this role. What do you think about this?
I mean, you mentioned many things. I wouldn't call it chaos, but I would say that because we need the data to be reliable, because we need the data to have quality, sometimes we do encounter certain situations that were missed. Indeed, because of the solutions we provide, it actually forces us to dig really deeper into their quality. And I see it as a very kind of, now going to your question, I think like that allows us to help improve a lot of systems that maybe it was missed. It's not only us, by the way. I think within the organizations, as you were pointing out, many teams work on top of data. So I see it as a joint effort across the organization where we as well are part of that. And it is normal to have sometimes data quality issues. There's so many reasons that can, take us there. So it is good to have more and more pairs of eyes that helps us, identify them as soon as possible. Oh, you're muted.
So I wanted to talk about one of the new topics that are coming now on data is the green data. The sustainability part of storage of data,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all the production of data and how the impact of how we design the systems has in how green we are. Because I think until now, we were designing systems and algorithms without thinking about this part of the effect or consequence of all the replicability of data, storage of data, you know, like it's infinite, but now we see more and more like energy is limited, and as well our planet is limited, so we cannot use thousands of resources only for data storage. And you know, the system, there has to be much more intelligence on this, not only the user behavior. You know, 50% of responsibility of sustainability is the companies, you know, the organizations that provide the solutions, not only the user. So what are your perspectives in this case of how organizations can be more green on the data and as well in the algorithms? And
that's a big topic, by the way, but I think it's really important for us to start thinking about it. I'm not sure at which point I'm the right person to propose solutions, but I do think that it is good for us to think about the technology designs, the architectures even like that we are promoting, and start questioning ourselves, like, do we really need all of that? Perhaps we can, you know, work with other partners that can be more sustainable. So I think from let's say from where I'm landing, I would be happy to be part of those conversations, give a better understanding if we really need all of that, especially if we become more and more aware, because you know, we hear about it, we read about it, but when we are in our day-to-day journey, it's not as easy, tangible to understand what's behind. Sometimes we think certain things have like a high consequence when they don't, and vice versa, right? So that's what I think. So I think it's good for us to start thinking about it. I think it's good also to raise awareness. And I'm really looking forward, as you do, so I don't have an answer, to understand what can be done. So yeah, so let's just keep us tuned and aware, and then if you know anything that we can help, for sure, I agree with you. I will be one of those supporters as well.
Yeah, I think that's very important to kick off the conversations and to have some kind of brainstormings as well internally when we design systems or we connect data, to be aware of this as well as a part of the project. So, and I think last question before we are going to the audience questions is, can you share some best practices to design, you know, systems, platforms, digital tools, algorithms in a very effective way? You know, we were talking about many things. So how can you summary all of them as a best practices?
Well, I'm you touch point a lot of things that it's not really under my umbrella. So if I focus from a data science perspective, how can we be more productive? So one of the things that we kind of touched point a bit was, how can I share what I've done with my colleagues? How can I even reuse things that I've built? So, I deliver one solution today, and how I delivered, something improved on top. And I know that this is a bit kind of a polemical one, but I'm going to put it out there. Maybe some people will ask a few questions about it. So in my vision, notebooks are amazing for exploring, for enabling us to kind of know what to do straight on. But they're not that good for code versioning. So I can see what I've done different from before and after. There are certain things being done, but it's not that easy. And they're not that easy also to reuse components out of that. So I've already explored a few solutions towards that direction, but it's still not there. So having that said, from a data science standpoint, and if you think about as a team, we all work together, what we need to think about is, what is my final solution? How do I share my insights? There are so many different ways of doing that. It doesn't need to be through PowerPoint, right? So we mentioned one. I can actually build a few dashboards. I can even, promote my insights on a tool such as Confluence, for example, so it doesn't kind of die in a collection of documents repository. But I think that line of thought in alignment and shareability, it's things that I think it helps the data science team to be more productive.
Super good. So I hope everyone is taking notes of this talk. So we have a few questions from the audience. Here one, because we are women, so there is a question of women. So what will you say to a woman who wants to be part of the data industry and they don't dare to think that because the sector is full of men.
All right, that's a very good one. And I didn't share this, but actually I come from an engineering background. So those are my studies. And when I still work as a software developer, I did see that because especially in the countries where I was at, there's a really big gap in there. But when I started to join more the data science world, I don't sense it as much because data science comes people from many different backgrounds. Yeah, engineering might be the first thought if you are kind of a bit more outside, but mathematics, which is in general quite balanced, statistics, physics, and I could keep going. So point being is that we do have a lot of more women coming in. Now, to address the other things, like how can you be kind of part of the industry? So first of all, what I would advise is don't be frightened by that concept. So perhaps you will not see it. And even if you see it, they are your peers, they are colleagues, they will embrace you, they will support you. So, and you are starting to make the difference, because if you are a woman, if you are getting there, you are one more, and one at a time until we are in the ideal scenario, which is balanced. So yeah. So don't see it. And I don't know, have the numbers, but I don't think it's kind of that dominated by men within the data world. That's my thinking.
Yeah, and as well, I think the part of data and technology in general needs this part of woman perspective into engineering. So I think, why not? Like, if you like it, don't be afraid, because statistics, like they like to pop up a lot of dramatic statistics of women in engineering. So I think it's like, don't even read it. If you like the data, if you like to design solutions, they are very good for everyone, which is the point. I think we need more women designing. So we have another question about ethics. So there is, ethics fits within the wall of data, understanding ethics as something moral. So go first, Filipa.
So yeah, I totally agree, by the way. So there's a certain, but then again, this is my personal view, right? When you are working with data, when you are building solutions, you have an opportunity to bring a voice towards what you see. So when you think about ethics, and I'm going to actually bring another terms like fairness, bias, these sort of things, sometimes they are just there, but you have the potential there to try to bring the difference in your solutions, even if it wasn't asked by you, right? Because in advance, sometimes those are not mentioned. It's not on purpose, because the focus was different, but you found them. So I think, yes, I always sense like, I feel like a certain responsibility to keep an eye for that. And every time that is visible, reach out. And in general, what I've seen is a very positive response, because nobody wants to bring bad solutions. And we want to actually aim for a good, I'm going to be generic, like a good world. That's where we want to aim for. And we can help get there. So yeah, so thank you for that question.
Yeah, and I think the part of ethics and moral, so we have to look, I think, on the values you have, the values the organization has, and how the technology and data, they can follow these values. And this is very important, because if not, you have in some solutions some mismatch, or it's not like expectations from some organizations to do exactly what they are doing with data, etc., etc. So I think this is the part of, if you are already thinking about a positive impact, or how the data and the solution is doing good for the organization, for the users and the consumers, I think you have to be aware of this. And as well, what is the objective of the algorithm? What is the objective of the data? What is the objective of your company? And matching this with the values of the organization and your own values, because you have to be comfortable as well of what you are doing. I think that could be one of the answers. But I think we are done with this BTS talk about data. So what is the maybe Filipa, the last words you want to say to the community of super professionals we have here about data?
I guess just the final takeaway, and also because the women were mentioned, I think if you are passionate about the topic, like if you are even curious, don't be afraid to give it a shot. There's so many different places that you can go to. So here you are coming from BTS, but you have so many different places for you to go to and try it out. So that's one thing, and don't let yourself be taken by certain takeaways that are not as positive. They are different experience, they are different places, and this is word for everything. And yeah, so I just want to say also thank you so much for the invitation, and Jara, for you kind of leading here the conversation, and it was really nice. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Filipa, and thank you, the BTS Barcelona Technology School team, who allows us to talk about data from completely different perspectives. Like usually they are talking about data in this topic. So thank you very much, and I think follow BTS because they are preparing a lot of talks and they have super good programs at the university to learn more about data, algorithms, and how to do a digital transformation in a very cool way. So see you soon, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.